Hello and welcome, friends, as we are here to bring you another pre-show. I know we've had some on and off shows for the last couple of weeks, but we're excited to get this one underway just before the playoffs. I am RichRad here with Moxie. We're entering into the, again, CEA Valorant pre-show for this fall season, and I'm just excited to be here getting this first pre-show off for the playoffs, Moxie.
Oh, I love playoffs because you suddenly go from that best of one to the best of three format. And a lot of the teams that we've seen, which I really do think could have benefited from that best of three format,
Mhm.
where they saw their opponents and they were able to figure out what they needed to do, but it just came too late. And in Valorant, if it comes too late, that one moment where you realize, oh, I've got to do this, you can't really recover if it's the best of one. You've already lost the series.
It's a lot of high risk, high reward. You have to put all your chips in the basket and hope that you win the pot. As we can take now a look at that standings, this is what we've got going into the playoffs. You can see all of the top teams that went through that were seeded. We even can see in that fifth bracket down, we had COE that was coming out from just this last weekend that was facing off against Liger, who was the third from the bottom. So both still managed to make it into the playoffs since they did have enough through that 9 weeks worth of seeding to enter into this playoff segment, which is going to be again over the next of the 5 weeks as we will continue. And again, there's a lot of, not surprising names in here with how well, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in just a moment, Liger Take doing this weekend that's passed. You said some stellar things about their composition and the way that they played over COE. We've also seen some other big names, Red Hat Uplink we've had on the broadcast, couple others as well. There's so many going into this, and we actually even have 2 interviewers today, Moxie, that are from teams that will be going into this weekend. They're not particularly facing each other, but they're still moving forward into this playoff phase to really start entering into those best of threes, as you said.
Yeah, and I don't know, looking down that bracket, I know Take for me is a personal favorite to win the entire thing. I don't know about you, Rich, but we've seen them a couple of times on the
Mm-hmm.
series, and every single time they've consistently had this level where they've been able to get things like 13 free score lines back to back some weeks.
Mm-hmm. And, honestly, it's just a great opportunity. Again, for those that are tuning in that might be curious to know, CEA is Corporate Esports Association, where we do have a virtual battlefield for these individuals to be able to fight for that number one spot. And again, that playoff bracket that you saw, those teams are fighting for that number one spot to put the winning prize money towards a charity of their choice. There are 7 game platforms, so we've got a lot of playoffs coming up here for the next few weeks before the end of the year, and it's just going to be an exciting amount of video game and esports action in that sense getting into this. And we've got a couple of great interviewers today. We've got a captain coming out from Amazon, It's Always Rush B, along with Facebook off your feed. We will be speaking with them after we go through a little bit of a recap of not only this past week, but also the release of Sky. And the charities are really great ones going into this weekend, aren't they, Moxie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, charities, all the ones that these teams have picked have been some really worthy causes, but we can actually take a look down at the charities that will be coming out for Amazon It's Always Rush B, which will be the Black Girls Code, which aims to increase the number of women of color in the digital space by empowering girls of color aged from 7 to 17 become innovators in STEM fields and leaders in their community. And Facebook off your feed, which I mean, I'm sorry, I love that name so much, are going to be playing for the Justice Initiative, which tries to provide research and recommendations to assist advocates and policymakers in the critically important work of criminal justice reform.
And, as we look into this before we start talking about the previous week, we got to touch on it because we actually, a few weeks ago, had an opportunity to discuss Sky and what we were anticipating coming out, how oppressive certain abilities would be. But now that it is live and in full use, we've gotten a complete rundown of this agent. And, looking at it, it's just crazy to see.
I mean, you say oppressive, and I don't really know who would oppress us better, the enemy team or the team that gets flashed by their own Sky.
True.
Because I don't know about you, Rich, but I have noticed a big increase in the number of skies and the same amount of increase in the number of times that I've been friendly flashed out. Whether there is a correlation between the two, I'll leave that to everyone's imagination. But Sky is one of those agents where you give her the space and she really does just overpower compositions that people want to run. All of her utility is shootable. So when it comes towards you, you can fire bullets into it to make sure that it does not connect. The one thing, and I've actually been having a couple of discussions with some other casters and players of the scene outside of CEA. And they agree on this one thing being a little bit overpowered in Sky, and that she has the only flash that guarantees and gives you information on when that flash is successful. So what we're actually seeing is
Interesting.
even failed flashes, even failed guiding lights coming through provide so much information for a team that people will just send the guiding light forward in a sort of faux run it back ultimate. They'll send it before they want to commit onto a point to get the information of whether they're going to be running into players or whether or not it's clear. And that side, that aspect, it being the only one of its kind that does give you that voice cue, that puts Sky a little bit above a lot of the agents in terms of that flash utility.
Yeah, and again, information is the name of the game when it comes to Valorant. And when you can have that little bit of added value, I'm curious to see if that's going to hold true. Again, we saw some, very interesting changes most recently that came to Cypher, especially, after death, where you don't have those trips any longer that are functionable. They become deactivated, over the course of competitive play. We've seen those adaptations to the abilities, and I would not be surprised if there is a lot of oppression that comes out from using that in the kit that Sky has, that could be adjusted as well. But we're only in the early stages of it because we also, and you are very excited about it, seeing Icebox coming in the next week or so, as we will be able to actually have that being involved for this playoffs and seeing when the first day it's going to debut.
Icebox is a split one at the moment. At least I've noticed it a significant difference between the EU regions and the NA regions when it comes to Icebox, particularly on the attack. When I play on the EU region with my friends, then we actually tend to see every single time that A push coming through, so that you try and take high ground, you clear off the defense, and you move on to it, and you try and sort of guard off mid. And then on the American aspect of it, I'm actually seeing a couple more B pushes where you try and take advantage of all of the corners and all of the high ground that you are given. If you are able to get onto that site and hold it down, it can be extremely deadly to try and press into. But if you have things like recon bolts with Sova coming on through, which I've seen every single time I've been given to Icebox, I've seen a Sova either on my team or on the other side, because information, having that knowledge of what's waiting around those corners, what's hiding on that high ground, is really needed if you want to get an entire team safely onto one of those points.
Well, and even just to understand the dynamic of regional gameplay differences like that across the water, just seeing how those little micro nuances can make a significant difference in the play styles. And that's always something to highlight. And I mean, with your, analytical background of it, just to see it actually come to fruition in these types of tournaments is always really a good one. So I'm curious to see how that's going to play out going into this weekend, again, with the two that we'll be interviewing later that are going to enter into the playoffs. But before entering into those interviews, we still want to touch base on the previous week, where we did see again COE versus Ligertake, and Ligertake managing to actually take the win. And we'll start off with that first out the gate composition that we take a look at both of these sides, and we're seeing a very unique one of a Viper and a Sage going into this for COE.
It is fine. So if you're going to see those agents come out, it would be on this map, where a lot of teams know Sage does try to just wall off short as soon as the round begins, to provide you a little bit of extra time if you're on the defense to position yourself on the map to try and figure out where the attackers are going to be hitting. The Viper very good, as well as going for that bait play. The permanent utility means that a lot of the teams playing against a Viper think that teams will be investing on that point when things like that toxic screen comes out. And COE were using that, trying to hit that A site, trying to just keep control of all of the space. Because once you get control of the space, that's when this composition really comes into its own, because it is so hard if you've been able to keep things like the toxic screen and the wall up when the recontest comes through from that defending side, to safely move on to the point. And this is actually what you're going to be seeing in a couple of seconds. COE identify that they want to go onto that A site, which is where we see the Viper and the Sage like to play the most, and they're just going to drop so much utility that it is an absolute blanket on this point, and Ligertake's defense gets absolutely suffocated by the amount of utility that comes through and completely prevents them from moving.
Well, and even more so, just you've spent so much time basically just forcing Ligertake on the fence just to sit and wait. Like, you're sitting idly by, just wondering where this momentum's going to come from. And it is so swift with all of this utility, as you said, able to get a couple of pickups, and allows actually COE to take not only this first round, but the one immediately after. But as we start to see, this utility being forced out, the combination of the Sage Wall, the Viper, you've also got the Cypher as well. We can see that it does change up here in these later rounds. You will see that first one go to COE, but this second one is where you can actually see it start to change up because Take at this point says, all right, we get your strats. We've been able to start pulling ahead, and this is a perfect example of where you see COE start to cycle back with a slow, methodical play, looking to try and focus, getting that spike down and recovering, holding angles, but once again, falling short. And here you see the same strategic positioning, allowing the clock to run low before starting to unleash all of that utility from COE.
Like a take as well with their positioning. They're not peeking down B long. They're not in gardens. They're just waiting for Theory to actually reveal that composition where they want to hit on this particular map, and then this team can swiftly move through on that defensive retake. Because what they've noticed, and this is something that Like a Take does that I think really puts them above a lot of teams that we've seen so far in this tournament, Rich, is they download. They analyze what teams do, how they play, what utility they'll burn before that spike goes down, what utility they'll keep in the pocket when that spike's down, and they'll use it against you. And what they noticed with COE was that when they wanted to push on a point, a lot of utility was burned just trying to move onto it and drop that spike, and you're going to be seeing in a couple of seconds. Everything goes onto that A site once they want to get that spike in position, and Like a Take just wait. They're playing for the defense. They're waiting for COE to use all of that utility to burn themselves out of the Sage Wall so that it is safer for this team to move in and try and get that diffuse going through.
And you're going to get a clip of it right here. You've got a little bit of paranoia coming out from the side from Fancy, but now everything just comes out on top. The cage, the wall, the smoke, everything. But in the midst of it all, you've got a Sova Arrow and has all the information necessary.
RPG Spot was just waiting in lamps with that recon ball. And that's the thing. That's the reason why we're never going to see Viper really come into those normal picks that you see, because every single bit of her kit, it's all about obscuring sight, and it all gets absolutely obliterated by Sova.
Mm.
The second that a recon bot comes through, you can use Hunter's Fury to completely evaporate any sort of impact that Pit has. They can't hide in it. It doesn't take the damage. It's still going to see you dead. You have a recon bot going through, and no one can really hide Viper's toxic screen. While it looks very pretty and allows you to safely move on to the point a lot of these times, it still gets absolutely shredded the second you walk in front of it. And a Sova has something like a shock tart down. There is absolutely nothing you can do to walk into that agent, and that is why Like a Take had him positioned in lamps, still with that recon bolt, knowing full well that the push is going to come through, knowing full well that Sui like to bite their time and push on the point when they don't have a lot of it left to burn, so they can try and use that element of surprise drop absolutely everything, and then hope that they've got enough utility left, or they'll be able to get that frag with things like the Reyna and the Raze to try and tip the balance now that their utility's gone.
And as we take a look at this next one, too, again, a little bit later, you still see Take taking the advantage, looking to lead into this position. And you've got COE on the swap of sides now, playing defensively. Had a real challenge going into this because Take was just so well at managing to take space, coordinate themselves to play these angles. Yanthrax also getting a lot of great value overall in tandem, peek in the corner. And this one doesn't find too much, but still, there's just great overall map coordination. As you can tell, there's also some very late rotations that come through as in from COE.
Like a Take, we also know we've had a chance to talk to their captain a couple of times. When they're playing against the Sage Unbind, they will avoid that A site because that's where the wall is very likely to come through. So what they do is they actually position that Omen on the A side as the team were pushing down B to create noise and make it seem like it was a push, try and bait out that utility of the wall so they don't have to deal with it coming through and splitting off the team when that question of a recontest does come through. And this is something that Like a Take does. They identify where their opponent is going to be, where they will be likely to play, and they will put things on the table to make sure that they stay there as the rest of the team works their way around the other half of the map.
Mm-hmm. And as we take a look towards that later portion of the map, just before we enter into that final, this is that winning matchup between the two. You have now COE attempting their last final moments on the defensive side, and you see the still consistent applied pressure. And you commented too, where there was a lot more focus from Take to go towards this B point, which prevailed throughout the match more often than not.
Yeah, Fancy sitting on A short, just creating that noise, doing what Like It really likes to do when they did push on that B site, and it completely distracts both the Sage and the Viper. The entire rest of Ligatake are on that B point, but COE, they're relying right now on a Cypher, Arena, and a Raze to try and have that information, but that's not stopping power. And you can actually see Zero has been completely zoned off this point already. The toxic screen is trying to keep them in hooker, but it's still just not enough.
And then there's going to be a nice subtle rotation here, making sure that they can recontest to try and keep this up. And again, it's a long, drawn-out process, but towards the end of it all, it's got Ligertake managing to take the victory into this. And again, it was just really the biggest challenge to this was where once they started to focus back onto it, you can still see two residing from COE over by B, and this is where Liger can take advantage of it, especially when you've got to run it back.
And here's the thing as well. COE didn't have slow orbs. If they'd had slow orbs and Ligatake could not have gone down A short, it would have been an absolute death trap. But because you already burned it out, you baited it out of the stage with Fancy staying there on that A site in the very early part of that round. Ligatake know that it's safe and they can push on this A site in an angle that arguably should not be open to them.
And as you can see, that defeat comes through here for COE for this past weekend on the map of Bind. But, you know, the last thing we got to quickly highlight here is again, this is more so the pro strat highlight. I know that it is unfavorable to COE in this moment, but I just want to highlight again the consistency and the ability, usage, and coordination here. But the one thing to touch on is you also mentioned before we went even live on the broadcast is trying to stagger out these abilities and making sure that you are being methodical in their use. Even though they are very, very helpful to give an advantage for COE, in these instances, they just were unfortunately punished, even though they had the right idea.
They absolutely had the right idea. Like, this composition would have worked, but they felt so nervous. You're already 4 point differential. You need to get these rounds into your favor so you can come back into that economy that they had to burn every single bit of utility just to give them the confidence to walk forward. If you've been able to cycle it out, you use that sage wall, get yourself safely onto this point, then you drop the screen so that you can reposition around the point. Because another thing that COE did when they dropped all their utility, it's in the exact same space. So they only have control of one angle. The rest of them can get absolutely pinched from heaven and lamps, and there is absolutely nothing that this team can do because they've burned all of that utility just to keep themselves safe from that heaven side.
Indeed. I mean, I just like at least seeing a little bit more of the Sage and the Viper. I know you're feeling good about that. We've not seen too much of it. But again, I mean, even you've seen when it comes to some of, First Strike that there's been some variety also kind of rolled into these compositions as well, Moxie.
Yeah, teams starting to move away from the cipher, which I always find really interesting, and instead slotting in that killjoy. The way that we see, 100 Thieves and Cloud9, where they just drop the killjoy in, so you still have that information that you don't get flanked with the chicken turret coming down and pinning out that information, and then just going aggressive.
Yep.
Because there's one thing that Cypher really needs, and that's time to set up. You can't have the camera out when you're looking at it. You're not firing, you're not keeping yourself safe. So if you want to oppress the Cypher, just get in his face. And that's something that a lot of those professional teams are now starting to do, just move very quickly in. It's very similar, to how we saw the Sageless run coming through a couple of months ago, where everybody thought you had to have a Sage to successfully win a game in Valorant. And then along comes a team in the finals of phase who are just like, yeah, we're not running a Sage. We're just going to move forward aggressively. And there is absolutely nothing you can do in your power to stop that. Because if you try to burn your utility early in the round to stop the momentum, you don't have it for the recontest. And if you don't have utility for the recontest, you just don't have any foothold in that fight.
And we'll see if some of these teams coming up this weekend are going to be demonstrating some amazing strats and plays just like those in the higher league. Because, again, we're going into playoffs now, friends, so they can lay it all on the line, and they definitely have more than just one opportunity and one map to try and demonstrate their strengths. So we're going to actually take a brief break here just so we can enter into our interview section of the pre-show broadcast, as we're going to have Amazon It's Always Rush B with the Captain RZ. So don't go anywhere, as we're going to start picking the brain of this captain to see what we're looking to expect coming into this weekend. Hello and welcome back, friends. As we are here to continue on, we've got the interviewing segment of this Valorant pre-show for CEA for the fall tournament, and we are very grateful to have Ray here from Amazon. It's always Rush B. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. Happy Friday,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Yes, indeed. Friday it is. And now, but it's the day just before going into these playoffs. But before we start talking about some of the deeper dive questions that Moxie's got for you, let's just, tell us about yourself, your involvement as, a captain or player in that sense, and how you were involved in CEA as a whole.
Yeah, so this is my first year running CEA, which coincidentally coincided with the first sort of season with Valorant.
Mm-hmm.
And I just saw it, I think, on just like a company sort of alias that
Mm-hmm.
they have. I'm part of a gaming alias, and so saw that come through and was interested. And so reached out to the organizers, and that's sort of ran with it from there. So I kind of wish I knew about this earlier. So my background's in CS, so I've played CS since I was in like middle school. So I wish that I would have been able to be more involved earlier on, but I'm super excited for the first season of Valorant. It's been awesome.
Better late than never.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so if you played CS, then is this your first time in a gaming tournament, or have you also had a history of coming in and doing gaming competitions?
So I've done like local lands and whatnot, and have uh, and during high school was more involved with some of the actual leagues. Back then it was Cal and CEVO. So have experience doing that, but nothing related to like a corporate league or anything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and with the corporate league, so are your other teammates more so like all colleagues in the same sector? Is it, individuals from all across the spectrum of Amazon? Because I know Amazon has so many teams. How did you
Yeah.
end up finding these individuals? Was it still kind of a random thing, or were there a few that you knew closely that were also gamers? How did that kind of come about?
Yeah, so it was kind of a little bit of both. I would say initially, I mean, because I didn't really know how it was going to go. I didn't really know um, the different skill levels and whatnot, and so I just kind of we sort of had open tryouts, and quickly realized that there was a group of us that was kind of sort of a little bit more experienced, and
Mm-hmm.
so um, we kind of just took it as like the approach of like taking looking at the data first, like okay, like people's different roles, their experience, how much time they want to commit. We had like it's like try hard and like competitive and like casual and like just want to have fun, and so we kind of built it from there, and then
Mm-hmm.
we broke it out to about at, initially I think it was 5 teams, A through E, is it? A through E. And the A team was going to be like just like the ones that want to try hard, will commit the time, and
Mm-hmm.
we're sort of at the higher end of the rank spectrum. And we were using Act 1, Act 2 ranks. So it kind of went from there. And then I was a little bit more vocal just because I had some more experience with just being a part of leagues, and understanding sort of, especially with Valorant, with all the different agents, the need for like different compositions and stuff like that. You can't have 4 or 5 duelists probably on one team unless you're just absolute in god. So sort of just took an initial 5 roster and kind of ran with it, and then we made some tweaks from there. What's funny though is one of the guys I played CS with, and actually was a mutual friend, that we would occasionally play Valorant with, actually worked at Amazon, and I found that out, and so we were like, hey, like we're all interested, and so grabbed him immediately, and then towards sort of the the beginning of when we were going to start the league, some people
Mm-hmm.
dropped off, and there were some people that decided to change their minds on how involved they want to be. So I actually pulled someone who actually recently joined Amazon, who I played competitive CS with,
Okay.
pretty much from the very beginning, in, and so he was essentially our fifth, and the rest is history. So it's been pretty awesome.
So then, how rigorous is the training? I'm guessing a lot more hours go into practice for the tryhards than for the casuals. But how many hours do you guys practice in scrim each week?
So I hate to like say this because it's gonna be recorded, but we actually ended up not really playing or practicing. Um,
Okay.
the group. So I would say, and I'm not trying to be humble, but I'm probably the least skilled out of the five of us. I probably play the most. I play almost every day, and I would say it's going to be a lucky week if we get one or two comps together with the four or five of us. I mean, like half of the time, there's one or two people who like turn their computer on and it's 10:30 and we're warming up and they're like, oh shoot, there was a big update yesterday, huh? So like they're downloading the new patch. Um, so it's just, I mean, I would say we've been fortunate because we have these players on this team who are quite skilled. Um, namely the two Kevins on our team. They also have CS background and they can literally just come in dry and just pop heads. So we've been pretty fortunate in that fact. The other sort of hard part too is that one of our teammates is in Arizona time zone, so Mountain, I think it is.
Mhm.
And he has a weirder schedule. He can only play later in the night. And then my friend who I brought in, he actually works in ops at Amazon, so sometimes he's pulled for night shifts
Oh,
and can't
okay.
make it too. So sometimes it's just really scheduling. Again, I try and I only got captain because I was just more vocal and I just took a lot of people just don't want to have that responsibility.
Mhm.
So it just ended up on me. And um, I try and organize some scrims and try and get us together, but it's kind of hard. I would say so. I hate to say it, we don't practice as much as I would like to, um, but it's we have gotten a good feel of sort of how we want to sort of play and the different compositions that we have. And fortunately, all of the main heroes that we play also complement each other as well.
Mhm.
So it's worked out luckily, and so hopefully, fingers crossed that we can continue to do that. But we'll be involved again next season, and I've spoken to some of them, and we've all agreed that we're going to put a little bit more time into actually practicing. There are some incredible teams out there. In this league, so we definitely don't want to slip behind because we can very easily do that.
I mean, you found yourself in the playoffs, which is already an amazing feat in of itself. Competing against so many, so it's definitely in the right direction. And like you said, some highly skilled individuals. And to kind of piggyback off of a segment of what you said out of that, where you found a couple of your players being like, "Oh, hey, there's an update coming in. Like, I gotta download this." So, with that being said, what are your thoughts and opinions on the recent addition to Sky and some of the adaptations for buffs and nerfs that have come through leading into now this weekend for your team?
Yeah, so I would just say off the bat, Icebox is probably a permaban. I actually like Icebox a lot. I enjoy playing it. It feels more CSy for me. It's really fun. I'm an opper, so it's a fun playground. But I would say Kevin's played it probably three times now. I think Isaac's played it on DM a few times, maybe competitive once or twice. So it's just we're just gonna just practice probably off season and sort of get that involved. I don't think we're gonna take the risk of running it. If it comes down to it that we really don't want to play another map, I wouldn't mind just because again, a lot of these guys on the team can can um, can really improv quite well.
Hmm.
So I don't see it as a big concern, but I just don't want to take that risk for that. So Icebox is a permaban for us. That's just no question. And then with the new agent and sort of the nerfs that are happening, I am a Sentinel main, so I haven't been super happy with it, but I think it's allowed me to look at other agents like a Breach who's extremely strong and they continue to buff. So we'll try and get that in, but it also forces you to think about new things, which I think actually is a benefit if we still want to continue to play with Sentinels on how to better use our utility, how to better place myself so that I don't die early on, so that my my skills aren't used, or they're rendered useless after I
Mhm.
die. So I think it's actually been a positive, I would say, just so that we aren't so reliant on that. We're more reliant on actual like cooperation and our composition and stuff like that, and actual teamwork. Um, I would say Sky is very interesting. Um, I still haven't played Sky all too much. She is unlocked, and I've been considering playing her in some of the matches, but we'll still have to just figure it out. I think right now it's just consistency wherever I can find it for this team is going to be probably where we want to stick with. So, well, we probably won't deviate too often from our lineup. But again, given that now it's going to be a best out of three, we definitely have to consider sort of lineup changes and whatnot. So.
Mhm.
So you talked then about consistency and flexibility with your composition. If you're not going to be changing up agents, how are you going to handle coming in up against teams in that best of three scenario? Are you very good at analyzing how they like to play? And in that case, do you have a big vein of communication going for your team? Or is it just one person speaking?
So I would say that because all of these players are very experienced with FPS, we all have CS background, and most of us have some sort of a competitive background. The other Kevin on our team, he actually played for his college in the college leagues. So I would say that we have an understanding of how competitive play works typically, and so I would say I probably am the one that's trying to just keep everybody calm and just keep the ship going. We'll make sort of general callouts that we've seen and whatnot. And the other Kevin usually is kind of the mid game in game
Mhm.
leader on adjustments and stuff like that. But I always encourage our entire team to speak up if they really think that a rotate shouldn't happen, or if they really feel strongly about rotating, to call it out. I mean, we trust each other and our judgments that I think that works. But I think the thing that definitely doesn't, that hasn't worked is people being a little hesitant about that. So I
Mhm.
always tell people, if you feel confidently about a rotate or about a move or about a play, just say it. And if someone really has an opposite opinion, they'll say it too. But typically, we usually go with it. So it's worked out so far.
Well, and to build on it, we've heard Kevin 1, Kevin 2. So
Yeah.
with that being said, who would be the couple of individuals or specific individual that you would call out to say if there is someone you really need to keep an eye on, or just somebody that's going to have some nutty plays? Who would it be so far on your roster?
It would be one of the Kevins. I really can't choose between the two. Again, Brandon, who's our main Reyna and Jet, Isaac, they all can pop off at any time, especially Isaac. Isaac actually has kind of taken a break from FPSs, and I kind of had to drag him in here. But he back then was, I mean, like he was semi-pro in CS or on that level. So he can pop off, and he's in everybody on this team has that clutch factor and can step up. I would say, but if we really have to choose, it would be between one of the two Kevins. One of them, like just has some unorthodox play that can catch some people off guard, and so he can really just snowball. And then the other Kevin, who's our main Phoenix, he is just so consistent, just uh, always opening us up onto sites, getting entry frags. He can also clutch very well. So one of those two, and it's really just leaning on those two. But again, Brandon and Isaac are usually doing the same things on other sites too. So it's just really who can get the first opportunity, and we kind of roll from there.
Well, at least with the two Kevins, we know we've got chaos and coordination on both ends of the
Yes,
spectrum.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was initially a little because I'm not I'm not too aggressive in my play, I would say. Um, Especially with the op nerfs. I
Mhm.
was definitely more aggressive with the op prior to the op nerf, but Kevin really likes to get super aggressive on sites and stuff like that, and he mixes things up. So it really can snowball. It's been fun to see, but it has been a process to adjust to. So
And I think the entirety of Valorant is a process to adjust to. And do you know what? I've got to ask, Rich. We've got to. We do this every single week. And it feels a little bit strange. A little bit further back in the conversation, you said you were a Sentinels main, and I heard the name Cypher, but I did not hear the name Sage. All of this talk of adjustment. Did you, like me, have to go from Sage to another agent and now
Oh yeah.
to another?
Oh yeah. I
there
was
it
a Sage
is.
main. I was a Sage main. Yeah. I was a
You
Sage
see,
main.
I heard the hurt in the words and it resonates.
Yeah, I mean, it was fine because and I was a Sage main except for Bind. For some reason, whenever I played Sage on Bind, I would always bottom frag. So I would always steer away from Sage on Bind. I would usually play Cypher, and then back then it was just Cypher, and then Killjoy eventually. But yes, I was quite sad with the Sage nerf. But I would say recently we've seen more Sages in competitive play. So I think it's the mix of teams not being used to seeing Sages all that often in their games and sort of throwing them off, and not being able to adapt as quickly as before, sort of is bringing Sage back. So on maps like Bind and Ascent, we may think about that, but again, consistency is really what I'm trying to lean on. So I don't think we're going to be throwing a Viper out there or something like that.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we've at least gotten the most important detail out now towards the end of this interview about the Sage. But we do have to say, right? You had, it's like you just wait. You sit idly by, like, am I gonna ask my question about this? I dare ask. I dare ask.
You were going to ask. If I didn't ask,
I know you're not wrong. So, but
yeah.
we
kind
do
of shove those memories all the way to the back.
It's just
He loves to do this. He clips it every single time.
I do.
He clips my face when we talk about such. It's like ripping a band-aid off every single interview.
I mean, if only anybody could see our notes, like where we go into this, where we've just got that one statement highlighted where it's just like talk about Sage. So but
no, Rich, come on, let's quote it. It's break Moxie's heart with Sage. So.
Yes, it really is. For those that would love to know what our notes look like on the back end, that's literally all we do. But we do have to say, right, it has been an absolute pleasure having you here, being able to, pick your brain, talk about your experience here with CEA. Really excited to see you, looking to want to be more involved in the future. And like we said earlier, better late than never to come across it with, this type of, environment. And we're really, really looking forward to seeing how you work through that playoffs bracket since you've, really fought your way here through the regular season and 9 weeks to get here.
Yeah, it's been a fun ride. So hopefully we'll be able to show up each week and play some good matches. There are some incredible teams out there, so it's been really, really fun.
Well, it will be a definite roller coaster. So thank you once again. And for those that are here still tuning in, we've got one more interview coming up. We'll be back in just a moment here with Facebook Off Your Feed with Citron, as we are about to get that underway in just a moment. So don't go anywhere, friends, because we'll be back in a hot second. and welcome back, friends, as we are here for the second interview portion of this Valorant pre-show as we're entering into the playoffs. It's an exciting segment of this fall tournament for CEA, and we've got the amazing Citron coming in here from off your feed from Facebook. We already had Amazon talking a little earlier. Ray actually said some really kind words about you. You've had some discussions with them. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm happy it's Friday and excited for playoffs this weekend.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, as we've started with every individual that we've had interview, tell us about yourself, your involvement in Valorant, and how, you know, you got this role of taking on a team and, you know, leading them into the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. So I've been a gamer for a very long time. First started playing Counter-Strike 15 or so years ago. Did that for about 8 years and then took a break. And really kind of like got out of the competitive gaming scene until Valorant came out. And you know, the game came out, fell in love with it, immediately had that same like kind of Overwatch/CS mixture, and just fell in love with it. And so how I came to be on the team and to build out this team at Facebook for CEA was there's an internal chat group inside our company infrastructure called Valorant at Facebook, and so there was about 150 members in there.
Wow.
I had heard of CEA about a year ago. My brother was competing at CEA at Google on the Feeling Lucky team, and so that's how I kind of heard about this competitive corporate esports leagues. And with Valorant being a new game and me immediately kind of falling in love with it, I thought, hey, let's compete this season and see how it goes.
So you mentioned just there that you have a background in CS. Is that the same for the rest of the team?
Yeah, mostly. I think everyone played Counter-Strike prior to this. Counter-Strike, Overwatch, mostly first-person shooters.
Okay. So, I mean, you mentioned a big name, you know, Google Feeling Lucky. So you've heard some big names and they've done very well from themselves. So, you know, kind of going into this tournament, what have you really done to help prepare yourself to lead your team again, as we are seeing you in the playoffs now? How are you going to adapt going through this, you know, bracket?
Yeah, so I think we're going to play a little bit more than we have been in the past, and probably spend a little more time on strategizing and coming up with defaults and pistol strats and whatnot. We've actually been pretty consistent with the amount of time that we've played since the beginning. You know, we came together pretty early on and decided on 2 nights a week for us to get together and play for a couple hours. And for the most part, we've been able to either pull our 5 starters together or have some of our subs come in to be able to practice and have some fun together. Going into playoffs this weekend and beyond, yeah, I think we're just spending a little bit of time on each map, figuring out what the right composition is. We've recently made some changes to team comp on some of the maps, just based on new players that have been introduced, or changes to player capabilities with some patch updates. So yeah, I think it's just spending some time and just practicing site takes and site holds and all of that fun stuff.
So you mentioned just that patch notes have a little bit of an influence on composition. Do you guys base your agents and sort of lineups around what the patch notes have, or do you kind of play for comfort picks instead?
We're pretty stable, I'd say. So even with some of like the recent changes with Cypher and with Killjoy, we're still running Cypher and Killjoys. We're just likely, the people that were picking those characters are playing slightly differently. So instead of setting traps and kind of going aggro right afterwards, they might be playing a little bit more passive to make sure that their abilities like stay on and work throughout the game.
And, you know, you also mentioned a little earlier talking about, you know, how you're kind of strategizing and the, you know, types of player strengths that you have with a pool of 150 individuals. How did you, you know, find these specific members that you're working with to get a very cohesive team? Was it kind of, you know, a luck of the draw? Did you work with a couple that you know personally or have gamed with before? Like, how did that kind of come together to find where you are now?
Basically, like, post a sign up process for inside that group and created a Google form and had a bunch of different questions in there to figure out like who wants to participate, who wants to play for fun, who wants to play to win, what's your experience, what's your current rank, all of those kind of key details that would actually help us be able to kind of mash up teams together. And we had about 30 or so people show interest. And from that data, we kind of just started building some teams. And I think we had one or two like 10-mans that we had where just everyone kind of just got together and we played together, which was actually a lot of fun. And from that, people just started kind of clustering together, mostly by rank, I would say. So, the immortals and the diamonds, clustered up together, the golds and the plats clustered up together, and then golds and below kind of clustered up together into a third team. We actually had, we probably could have made 5 teams this season. We just ran out of, I think, just like leadership presence where there wasn't someone to like step up and say, hey, I'll captain this team and like manage this team. And so we luckily had 3 people this season to come together and run the 3 Facebook teams that we have.
Talking of coming together and captains, we did have a little bit of discussion off camera with RZ, who mentioned that you guys have had quite a bit of back and forth. Is that the same for the rest of the teams? Do you regularly interact with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning, I'd say less so now, but at the very beginning when we were standing up these teams, we were playing with each other all the time, setting up 10-man, scrimming against each other or whatnot. But yeah, I think if I read your question right or listened to your question right, I think everyone that's playing on these teams, I don't think anyone actually knows each other at work. So we've all like met each other through this process of everyone playing Valorant and being excited to compete in this tournament for a good cause. So I haven't met any of the 6 people on my team. And same thing with our B team and our C team. But we've spent many hours together, virtually playing Valorant together, which has been awesome.
I mean, honestly, it's nice to have, that option for kind of scrimming and preparing yourself and kind of elevating your experience. And, going into this with the individuals that you're now, participating with, who would be like the star individuals that you'd say, if there's somebody you kind of want to keep an eye out for, since you're just starting to get, to know them and relationships developing over the next couple of weeks, or these past several weeks, 9 weeks to be total,
yeah.
Correct. Whose name would you shout out? And you can say your own. You can say your own too.
Yeah, it's kind of a toss-up. We have a couple of really strong players. Tangelo and Piggy are super strong. Tendi is super strong. Khan is super strong. I think every single game we have a different top fragger, and sometimes one of them will just pop off and have just an incredible game. But most of us are pretty consistent across the board, and it's a really fun team to play on. I mean, to be honest, in my team, if they watch this, will laugh. Like I'm definitely the worst person on the team. I can carry my own for the most part and like be somewhat stable and consistent. But from a ranking perspective, I literally just last night got demoted to Plat 1. And so the 4 of my team members that I'm playing with on an ongoing basis literally have these secondary and third accounts that they use just because they're lower level than their immortal accounts, just so that they can play with me in comp. And so it's kind of hilarious. So I need to spend some extra time up leveling my game and up leveling my rank so that I can play with them in comp, which is kind of funny. But it's been a blast. I mean, I've learned a lot, playing with these guys. I'd say my in-game skill and game sense and whatnot has increased a ton just because I'm playing with better players. And so selfishly, it's been an awesome experience for me.
Well, I mean, honestly, too, when it comes to wanting to develop yourself, I know Moxie, we were talking about it earlier, with seeing some of the updates with Sky. How are you, interpreting the coming patches and the usage of Sky?
Yeah, I mean, Sky is a super powerful character. It's like the perfect mix of a couple characters in one in terms of her abilities. We haven't run her in any of our comps, but we likely might test her out just because she is so powerful. Mm-hmm. We're learning how to play against her in the scrims and matches that we've been playing in. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. I know a couple of my team members have been playing her outside of the tournament, and so if there's a map that they're super confident in switching out, I mean, we're open to it. We really are kind of changing up comps left and right, just depending on the mood or how we think we can actually do better. Especially on maps that we are losing consistently against really good teams. Composition can definitely play a part of that. And so we're evaluating like, hey, do we swap out this character for this character so we can be more aggressive or take sites easier or whatnot. So we're definitely thinking through all that stuff.
So you actually mentioned there that you're practicing playing against Skye rather than running her. Is this an approach that you have for a lot of the new things that Valorant has thrown at you? Do you practice playing against them rather than integrating them in?
No, I mean, I think it's just dependent on the character. So, and who our team members are comfortable playing. Like, I'm pretty much a Sova one trick, but I'm also starting to learn how to play, Breach and some other characters just to help out with the team because Sova isn't great on every map. But Killjoy, for instance, we almost immediately took Killjoy into our fold, and we're running a Killjoy or a Cypher on almost every map that we play. So it really just depends on the character. There's definitely, Sova and Skye combos that are super powerful, depending on the map. We just honestly haven't explored it yet.
I mean,
are you telling me that you guys have a team name called Off Your Feed and you don't run Breach?
Yeah, if you look at our logo, in the Gilded site and on the CEA site, our logo is Breach, which is hilarious. And yeah, we're using Breach on a couple maps, but we used to not use Breach at all, which was pretty funny.
That's hilarious. Well, also just to the little bit of the Sova comment, because we've had Moxi have to go from her Sage main now to a top of the leaderboard Sova. So here in the Sova one trick focus is making her probably really happy to see that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I mean,
you gotta take those boxes,
right?
Rich. Every single interview, you've just gotta take that one box.
I really do. I really have to go right for the kidney every time. Just but I mean, honestly, like you said, I mean, Moxi, what are your thoughts on the the synergy between Skye and Sova? I mean, would you agree in that context, or what kind of values that holds together?
I mean, there's absolutely a lot of value that you can find, I think, when you combine Skye with any agent, with just how potent those flashes are and the fact that you're going to be running. The second that you use any sort of Skye utility, you always force the team to either try and aggressively move forward so they can deal with it, or they push backwards. And as soon as they start moving backwards, that's when the rest of your team can start walking forward and using their utility to find a lot more value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be exciting to see, and like I said, we're really, really grateful for your time to be able to talk today. Going into this first playoff week, we are rooting for all teams just to give it their all, and like I said, I'm just grateful that we had the chance to get you in for the pre-show interview, at least for sure moving forward. But again, with how your team's been doing going through the playoffs, I don't doubt, in the near future that we'd be seeing you live on the stream, seeing if you can take that best of 3 coming up shortly. So, Citron, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here, my friend.
Yeah, it's been great. And one plug is that my team would love to be streamed sometime soon. They told me that I had to land that in this interview.
It's okay.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. But yeah, I guess closing message for me is that this experience has been a blast. The platform that you guys have created with CEA has been a lot of fun. And appreciate all the work that you guys do.
Well, we'll be definitely forwarding that clip over on Twitch too. That's what you should tell. That's what you should tell all your other players. We just clip that and just send it over to our producer and just. So, well, like I said, we've got still a lot of weeks coming up, my friends. So, again, thank you so very much. We're very, very grateful to have you here, and we're glad that you are finding the experience rewarding, being involved with CEA and in this Valorant game. So, we do hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much.
And for all of you that are still tuning in, we greatly appreciate your investment into seeing these teams go through quite the adventure. Moxi, we've already had 9 weeks of preseason, and we're entering into the final moments of these playoffs. We've got those brackets coming up. You and Sir Waltham will be able to lead the way, and I know tomorrow's going to be an interesting one because, again, you've got that first to, best of 3, so there's going to be more rounds than just one and how these teams adapt.
Yeah, a lot I think is really going to come down into quite some heavy focus on whether we're going to see compositions shift around or whether teams are going to be extremely static with the agents that they run. Because Valorant is one of those where sometimes composition does depend on which map we see. So when you have that best of one, you're sort of locked into these compositions that teams come in with where they have strategies based around getting picked from bind or getting picked on ascent. So not just the team that they're running up against, but where they're actually going to be fighting is really going to define a lot of these strategies.
And tomorrow, we're looking forward to seeing playoffs underway. Like we said, for those that are tuning in, you can definitely find out more in the information section below. We have the Discord there with that information. Also, if you'd like to find out more about CEA and how your company might be able to join in on the adventure that we've got here, just like this fall season, you can go to that CEA.gg and find out all the information for the next season going into 2021. Again, this virtual environment for you to have some extracurricular activity, definitely put some money towards some amazing charities, and just have fun with your coworkers at your company. It is always a pleasure being able to bring this pre-show before we enter into those weekend matches. So make sure to join in tomorrow at 11 a.m. PST for that first playoff matchup, which we will be finding out later this evening who will be broadcasted live. So we look to see you tomorrow, friends. Have a great day, happy gaming, and we'll look to see you tomorrow.